Welcome guys back to another lecture in our color design section on how to use it. So in this one I'm going to be talking about content variations when it comes to color. So I'm going to be talking about how to basically create more depth and color swapping and how it's used today. So when it comes to creating more depth, in order to not make the levels feel boring and plain, adding color variations can always keep the user engaged. So having different hues for the same scene can change a player's emotion on a whim. So now take an example of the one that we look at over here. We know what our identifier is, right? So our main identifier is black. That is the player. And the user and the level designer in this game decided to use primary and secondary colors as distinctions in different types of levels. Now this is nothing wrong with that. The player could use this 100%. So obviously he's using glyphs as black, so our identifier is black, and the neutrals are just all the different types of color schemes that you can think of. And obviously this is a great way to use color schemes in general, in terms of what type of hues generate what type of feelings. So as we can see, blue would be the calming stage that we would assume. The red would probably be the most aggressive level that there is. The different types, the red, green, the purple, red, and orange scene would be probably the one that's maybe like wacky or something's out of the ordinary. The green one would just be the one that's very daunting and ominous about it. And this can either be done manually or procedurally when it comes to choosing what type of levels and palettes are being chosen. See, manually changing color schemes for a level does give more control to the designer. But procedural color schemes also generating will also make the game always feel fresh. So looking at Geometry Dash at the bottom, this is more or less a game that different types of colors are showcased at different levels for every time you want to redo it or entering a new area. So if you want to manually dictate what type of colors are going to be used in terms of your color scheme for, let's say, a certain level, that is great if you want to use it for a narrative element, or if you want to really control the pace and the linearity of the game. If you want to go for unlinear style of level design, then procedural color scheme is completely up your ballpark, because at that point anything goes, and you want to keep the game as fresh and as new as possible. So now talking about color swapping. So sometimes a game is limited to the amount of space it has, and this was a common issue not too long ago. A game could only have a certain amount of megabytes that could be used and then downloaded on in an iOS or in a mobile game, Android. So they had to make do with what they had. So having icons associated to an identifier helped create more depth. So they would have a bunch of icons that they would create and then use different types of colors in the game, so different textures on those different icons to make it seem like there was different types of gems out there, when in theory there's only 3 or 4 real gems, and then they would just use different colors. And so when a color is designated to being a specific value, then using that hue of color code certain items is useful, because it gives it gives value to that hue. So regardless if the same image is being used, the player will look past that and see the hue of the image and associate a value to it. So example, let's take World of Warcraft, where they have obviously millions types of weapons. And now a player could see the same image over and over again, but they know the differentiation between a green good piece of gear and a purple epic piece of gear. Regardless of the image that is being used, when the player sees that purple flash on the screen in the little loot box, they know that they got an epic. And they don't even look at the image at that point. They just look at the hue and associate a value with it right away. So now, talking about content variations in conclusion, it's always good to note that when you want to design a level, that you have certain restrictions in place. You have to pretty much plan how you want to construct your level in terms of what you want to use as ingredients and what you want to use as your color schemes. And you have to also decide if you want to have, for example, a procedural or a manually designed level, because that does make a big impact in how the player is going to engage in the game. So that's something to always keep in mind when it comes to different types of content variations. And that's it, guys, for this little lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.